I'm hitting the blue go live button.
And your doorbell's ringing.
That's the real mystery guest.
Yeah, Mike Chase is showing up at your apartment.
You guys heard that, and we're live.
we didn't just hear the doorbell ring, Kate. We saw you nod to John like, yeah, you deal with it, dude. Get the fucking door.
He was sitting here doing yoga and off camera, and I was just like, did you hear that? Yes, you heard it. You have to go get it. Anyways, it is Sunday, April 25th, 5:03 p.m. I'm blushing because I got caught with our delivery of groceries coming in the middle of the show. And it's Mystery Guest Sunday. And in lieu of fun, we are here with Mike Chase of A Crime a Day Twitter feed. You do have a podcast yet, Mike?
No, I announced repeatedly that I'm happy to announce that I still do not have a podcast. There are too many good podcasts. I don't need to crowd the space.
But none of them is devoted to the most improbable applications of the federal criminal law.
I have not yet conceived of a way to do the Crime a Day podcast doing justice to what the Crime a Day podcast needs to be, yet still staying out of federal prison. I don't know that there's a way to thread that needle.
I mean, I think you should do it as like This American Life. You know, it'd be like a highly produced every day. You'd have to get like Michael Barbaro and the Daily people to do it. And every day you give them a factual scenario that violates, and you know, they set it to music and tell the story of the one prosecution of this, you know, cheese crime that has ever happened.
Yeah, it could be like, this is how Ira Glass finally goes to prison. Is by like coming on my podcast. It takes like one episode. Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
I love that. That would be perfect.
Or you could do it entirely fictional.
Yeah,
you know, you could have like, have you ever listened to the podcast, The Onion's podcast, A Very Fatal Murder?
Oh, I have, yes.
Which I think is brilliant, by the way.
Yeah.
And if you guys haven't listened to A Very Fatal Murder, I highly recommend it. It's a sort of spoof on Serial and that genre.
A Very Fatal Murder?
A Very Fatal Murder.
That is like amazing.
And there are parts of it that are genuinely shocking. It's mostly a spoof of the sort of serialized true crime form. So he says at the beginning of the show had everything: an unsolved mystery, a small town that, you know, revealed all of our class social divides, and a really hot dead white chick. It's a wonderful, it's very funny, and it's actually but you could do like a cheese crime today and just make up the story.
You know, it's funny you say that though. So TikTok really is the thing now, and I was thinking that I could do a cooking show that's just federally illegal foods, because there are so many food crimes that I could like.
You could do like that weird little bird sparrow thing that people got busted for eating in Italy. Sorry,
in France.
What was this? I don't know.
You're supposed to wear a napkin over your face when you eat them, because
you eat the whole bird.
You eat the whole bird in one bite, and
it's really gross.
And you're supposed to, because it's a shame to destroy anything. You should be ashamed to destroy anything so beautiful.
Then don't do it. Then don't. Then don't. Like, it's the easiest solution. Just don't do it.
It's a wonderful, horrible tradition. Also, the birds are endangered.
Yeah, exactly. They're endangered. No, I'm referring to, it was actually not ortolans. It was another type of small, tiny sparrow in Italy that is also endangered and also illegal to kill. And there was a New York Times article about how cops went to break up this this anti-COVID, like, huge barbecue that was happening in like Italy, like this party outdoors, and in like southern Italy, I should add. just because I think it's apparently that's where this bird is from, and found like under the table, like just like this heaping pile of like basically like dead birds that were like had all been prepared to be eaten.
Like peanut shells at a roadhouse or something like that? Just discarded carcasses of squirrels?
No, they had taken it was like the peanuts on the table, and they'd like taken them and hidden them under the table so that they wouldn't find them.
Oh God.
And so it was like, and then it was like all about that. But anyways, this is apparently there we go. I am not going to buy you this.
People in the comments are saying, "I do not want to hear about eating birds."
Well, Pauline, to be fair,
like has a whole thing.
Gorgeous pictures of birds every day.
And her little avatar is a bird. So
I do not want to tell you about Kentucky Fried Chicken. You're going to be horrified at the concept of Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Oh my God! Except maybe chicken.
Okay, all right, there we go. All right, that's fine. Yeah.
But I do want to say that I will not get you then this podcast journal, podcast planner. Amazon has been spamming me with these planners. They are these bizarre little diaries that let me see, podcast planner, episode journal with black cover, plan and record notes, host, date, guest, recording duration, length, and the sponsor advertiser.
Why would you want to record that?
I don't understand at all.
I mean,
why would you want to record it analogically when you're doing all of that online?
Right. I mean, you can go back to the back episodes, and it even says on your like iPhone which ones you've listened to. Why would you want?
I don't know. Like, so my question is, if this is my question for Mike. You know how diaries are semi-protected and semi-not protected? What would the podcast planner be considered?
What do you mean semi-protected? I mean, diaries. I have subpoenaed people's diaries and got them in Discovery, and they are great. Now, if you have a diary where you begin basically every entry and you say, "To my beloved attorney" at the beginning, maybe you've got a little bit of protect. But a podcast journal is not only, I think, admissible. I think you can get an adverse inference that somebody keeps a podcast journal. I think it's just of guilt of any kind. Yeah.
I just want to know, are there journals available, Kate, for live streamed video shows that are entirely impromptu?
No, that don't have any sponsors, and it's unclear who the host is. No, not even even a little bit. Why is this useful to me? I don't know.
I don't think that's fair. Can we? Is Amazon protected by Section 230 for the user contributed? Yeah. Can we
Section
sue them for?
Section 230 definitely protects you from unequal distribution of diaries.
I think that's an Etsy item. I think it's an Etsy item because this is a bespoke podcast. You know what I mean? This is handcrafted.
Bespoke podcast, Ben.
Oh yeah,
that's our branding.
Yeah, it's shocking that this podcast didn't originate in
podcasting.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I would like to say that I will. If you start a podcast, I will buy you that diary, and I will attach a note to the front of it that says, "To my dearest attorney," and I will tape $1 to the front of it, and then that will clear. That'll just be good.
Well, query whether your diary or my diary constitutes work product. I don't know, but
It's a great question.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that I think is so interesting about an analog medium for recording digital media consumption, right? That's what this is.
But I literally read Twitter like it's the New York Times in bed.
That's right.
I literally spent, John's nodding. I spent 3 hours today between sleep and wake in which I was just reading the New York Times and falling asleep. And it was like the days where I used to walk down to the deli and buy a copy of the New York Times and do the crossword puzzle and read a bunch of the articles. But it didn't cost. Yeah.
But here's the thing that's troubling me. So all the data for this podcast diary already exists in your phone, right?
Yes.
So
why would you want to write it down in an analog form?
Yeah, couldn't we make an app that scrapes at your privacy protective, of course, that scrapes your podcast consumption, records all this, and then prints it for you in a form so that you would automatically generate your podcast diary, and we could then digitize the process of podcast diary creation.
And why are you trying to grift on the razor thin margin of like podcast planners being sold on Amazon?
It's a great way.
I'm just trying to make the world a better place here and make a product that's
it's great.
That's
I think it's a great way to
eliminate this industry and outsource all its jobs to Bangalore.
And increase the carbon footprint of podcasts, right?
Exactly.
Meaningfully, yeah.
Oh,
right.
that actually makes me like tear up a little. I'm like laughing so hard. I'm like, oh my God, this is such a bad idea in so many ways.
All right.
So we've managed to like talk about nothing for 13 minutes, which is but laugh a lot, which is kind of exactly what this show is all about. Mike Chase, I have some questions for you that I've always wanted to ask about A Crime a Day and your book. So one of my questions is, did this make you like lose faith in the law to write about this at all? To make you lose faith in kind of the construction of like how laws are created and the salience of like laws being judge made versus statutory and coming from legislatures? Like, is there a sense that you kind of felt dismayed at any point in writing the book?
No, actually, I would say if anything, it went the other direction, because when I first started out the project, it kind of came from I would say a sort of an uber libertarian instinct, right? Which is this like, Congress is supposed to be writing the law. This is crazy that they're just giving away blanket authority to administrative agencies to effectively write law. And let's just expose this. But I've read so much of the Code of Federal Regulations now at this point. I mean, like, disgusting amounts of the Code of Federal Regulations, and studied every subsection, looked at the Federal Register, looked at the various versions. And in researching the book, I read legislative history. I was reading comments that were submitted in support of many of these regulations. And I actually developed a real fondness for some of the process by which a lot of these regulations came about and were written, and how many smart people were involved in writing them, and the reasons why, margarine should only be X yellow versus it can't be too much red. This is confusing, but more right, or more meaningfully, like the history of like why cranberry barrels had to have smaller bulges than apple barrels, and so like I studied bulge size a lot for like a long time.
Wait, is that true?
It's totally true. It's totally true.
It's like gas release or something?
It's because the barrel, right? A barrel, like a bushel or a peck or whatever, it's like a unit of measure, and it's a consumer protection. It's a consumer protection methodology. But it's like, look, if you're back in the day, you're buying a barrel of cranberries. It needs to be a standardized size, and it also needs to be readily distinguishable that you're not stuffing cranberries into apple barrels and vice versa for consumer confusion. Yeah. But, all these things seem so silly on their face, and they're correct when I tweet them because these are what the elements of the offense would be. But that's not to say that if you don't look behind sort of the objective elements of the offense, that there's not like good faith basis and actual meaningful study behind them. Look, some of them are ridiculous, but no, I mean, to answer your core question, I actually came away with a much deeper respect for the lawmaking and rulemaking process. Yeah.
Go ahead, Kate.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you like? It's one thing to have gotten to the level of becoming the federal code, right?
Yeah.
So like that's obviously a higher level than a lot of state and local codes. Are you at all interested in kind of looking at state and local codes? How would you pick a jurisdiction? Like, I mean, it seems like an obvious next product or like a next like kind of thing for you. And I wonder if you'd have similar types of, I wonder also like how much work did you do in looking at the rate of like enforcement on the various laws that you were doing? I mean, and like, how could you ever measure that? I'm kind of curious about that.
there's probably three facets to that are meaningful, right? In terms of what, because that's the core question everybody asks. They say, look, you're quoting all these ridiculous rules and regulations. You're saying there's a criminal penalty attached to them, but who's actually being prosecuted for it? The answer is not all that many people, to be honest with you. And so what I look at, because I'm a criminal defense lawyer by trade, I looked at meaningful federal criminal prosecutions, of which justice statistics peg at about 1.5% to 2% for strictly regulatory violations made criminal by statute. So that's hard to quantify. In practice, in defending folks and doing proffer sessions before the FBI and the DOJ and spending time with these enforcement agencies, I have found that if you quantified enforcement as putting the fear of God into somebody, that they're actually going to have a problem and that there's actually going to be some sort of penalty. If they count that as enforcement, which I do, because it obviously corrects conduct outside of the judicial process, I think that is a much greater rate, that where people are getting notice letters, warning letters, things like that end up giving them fear, or can cause them to in sometimes plead to an offense because there's actually a raft of other things that they've done wrong. In terms of this question of broader enforcement, I think a lot of stuff happens where it's intended, which is purely in the agency setting, which is good and a healthy thing, which should happen. But if you expanded that beyond the federal realm into the state realm and the municipal realm, it's orders of magnitude larger. I mean, obviously, the federal justice system sees a lot of prosecutions, but it's tiny in comparison to state prosecutions. So that you're right, it is the obvious next product. I'm tackling that product now for the state level. One thing that is very interesting is the extent to which, for example, in municipal ordinances, which can oftentimes have very serious penalties for folks, is the extent to which municipal codes have been essentially protected by intellectual property law. And where, in the federal side, I didn't deal with that when I was publishing my book. I was able to sort of just quote law chapter and verse and publish things. But there have been actually people who have been threatened with legal action by reproducing municipal code ordinances because some entity, whether it's Municicode or it's some other group, claims to own the municipal code. So that they alone can license it to some third-party distribution. And so there are some issues there as well. So it's like crime on top of crime, or, prohibition
That's
on top
super
of
interesting. Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
So I want to ask you about a different angle on your work, which is something that we've talked about privately before, but I am interested in why so little legal commentary is funny.
Yeah, right.
So, there's this weird culture in the legal commentariat that you're supposed to be, a button-down Benjamin Wittes legal analyst for, well, Jim, the
That was pretty cogent, actually.
Yeah,
I agree with everything you just said. Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what you actually say. It could be total nonsense. If you say it roughly in that tone of voice and with that level of, sort of tired bullshit, people take it as, and even if it's completely wrong.
Right.
And you have had, a years-long project now that is extremely substantive. And for those who don't actually, Crime a Day actually has a lot to say, and you actually have to read it, not every day necessarily, but regularly, to understand the argument that it's making. But it is making an argument. And you have deployed humor to do that. This is a really unusual choice, and it's one that the legal commentariat really doesn't approve of, in the sense, not that people are clucking about Crime a Day, but that people don't actually choose to behave that way. And
But this is not unique to Mike. This is in everything. Like the law is just takes itself incredibly seriously.
right, but I mean there's a lot of political humor, right? Like you're basically, a sort of like Jon Stewart or Stephen Colbert, like somebody who's making serious points about the law using humor. Why is this so rare in the legal community?
A lot of lawyers are not funny. I mean, a lot of lawyers, they think they are hilarious. They are really desperately unfunny people. I mean, not you. No, there are a lot of people who are just not funny. And I mean, you see it. There's a conversation that's happening on Twitter a lot lately, where outside of the advocates, right, like the trial lawyers or whoever is appearing in court, it's a devastatingly bad decision to try and be funny in front of a judge or in front of a jury. In a lot of cases, the risk that you are taking, because you have a duty to your client, and if you're trying to be funny, you could really prejudice a case. You don't ever want to be grieved for making a joke in court, period. Like, you just don't want to do that. But there's a new discussion that's happening right now, which has not worked, which is judges increasingly are trying to be hilarious in their opinions. They're trying to be cute, or they're trying to quote pop culture to great comedic effect. And I think there's a lot of folks.
Kaczynski and a bunch of others did that for years, kind of.
Right. And
Elena Kagan does it, with those Spider-Man references, and and some justices are more capable of good humor than others. Honestly,
there are some that have done it occasionally, where I will say that the corner of my, I've smirked at them, or I've thought they were somewhat funny. Others I haven't. Sometimes I will admit it is colored by my perception going in of that judge in a lot of cases, but at the end of the day, I think it's because people demand soberness out of the legal system because of what's at stake, right? I mean, it's just like it's like having a hilarious doctor, right? I mean, not everybody wants Patch Adams coming in to operate on them because there's a concern that something of grave seriousness is not being taken seriously enough. That said, I do think that there are areas where I am not, and I've made a very careful choice to not generally, absent the most extreme example, mock folks in the justice system, right? Not to mock a person who has their liberty at stake or something along those lines, right? I'm mostly mocking the folks that have voraciously sought power and have misused that power in order to either legislate purely based on outrage or whatever, who I think have misused their position of power, or have just been careless in it, right? Have abdicated some responsibility to an executive branch agency that's acting in good faith, but ends up creating butter crimes or ends up creating, cheese crimes. And, the only way that we're ever going to get some of these off the books is by laughing at them, I think. And you'll see in the omnibus bill, at the end of last year,
they got rid of some of my favorite statutory offenses.
Hey, you and me both. And it was this was the Clean Up the Code bill that about 3 or 4 years into crime a day, a bill got introduced to repeal like 7 of the crime a day greatest hits, right?
But were they greatest hits because they were so weird and kind of unhinged from shit, or they had? But they had no, like you were describing the barrels, like they had no nexus and kind of that type of justification.
Yeah, okay. Worse. So there was a title of Chapter 18. I mean, a chapter of Title 18, rather, that was really the false personation title.
Impersonating Smokey the Bear or the Swiss coat of arms.
Exactly right.
There is no good reason for this?
Yes, there is a good reason for it, and it's that the United States government can't copyright its stuff, but they can put you in prison for it, right? And so they said, wait, we can't copyright Woodsy Owl? Well, what if we just throw people in prison if they misuse it? And so the inability to copyright, they just use the criminal penalty in order to protect it. And there was
up.
It was not a good choice.
And the Swiss coat of arms was originally, I think, to protect the International Committee of the Red Cross.
That's right. It really was
to prevent people from, pretending to be medics But,
Correct.
like how many people are out in battlefields pretending to be medics in violation of 18 USC,
Well, it's
whatever.
actually really funny. I was watching MASH last night and I had forgotten that the tops of all of the tents in MASH have like the giant cross on them, so that like they know not to bomb them. Anyway, so like, sorry. I mean, obviously, I was
No.
just, that's like a random, but I was like, oh, like, if I was and I was thinking to myself, if I was a smart person in the Korean War, like, I would have just figured out how to put up I mean, obviously, they would be outside kind of the jurisdiction of like the US federal code, but like,
Right.
interesting question. I had never thought about that before.
So
Yeah.
which other ones did they get rid of?
Yeah, so they got rid of the interstate transportation of water hyacinths, but that are referred to in Title 18 as water chestnuts. I mean, they are colloquially. They're not the water chestnuts that you and I think of in a can, right? But in the statute, they're referred to as water chestnuts because it's an alternate name for them. They're an invasive plant pest and plant species, and there actually is some damage, and they were removed solely because of the view. Essentially, it was removed from the criminal code essentially solely for the reason that people thought it was silly. And then a couple of other ones, they removed. I thought this was interesting because if you get to the last chapter in my book, I talk about one of my favorite crimes, which is that it's a federal crime to pretend to be a member of 4-H. And so
the epidemic of 4-H impersonators.
Right. But there are actually two sections that deal with the 4-H that are with federal criminal penalties. One of which is to impersonate a 4-H member. The other one is to unlawfully use the 4-H logo, which is the 4-leaf clover essentially.
Yeah,
So they got rid of the one. They got rid of the federal crime to misuse the logo, but it still remains a crime on the books to falsely impersonate a member of 4-H. And so it was just them not being careful. It was not a particularly good bill. It was totally to make a point. It wasn't actually a meaningful effort to clean up the code. There are much more broad sweeping and potentially ruinous statutes with criminal penalties that are just totally unaddressed by this bill. And I just thought it was, it's silly and it's fine. But I don't think you could even call it a first step in eliminating overcriminalization. And it was sort of silly and just attached onto the bill. And it didn't advance the ball in the argument I'm making, at least, at all. Yeah.
Interesting.
I think there's
Whoa, Kate's sounding weird.
Yeah, RoboCop. But it sounds fine now, I think, right? Or did we lose Kate?
Well, no, she muted herself.
Oh.
No, she didn't. She has been muted by life. She's been. We're going to be in Kate Charades land. Kate, you should refresh your browser. You'll disappear for a minute, and then you'll be back and be fine. I want to posit another reason why I think legal commentariat isn't funny.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, so there are members of the legal commentariat who are extremely funny. And Dahlia Lithwick, for example, who has been on this show, really started out as a legal humor writer. She
was great.
She covered the Supreme Court as basically like as a sports writer. It sounded totally different from anything else. But she migrated over time toward more traditional legal commentary, less humorous. And I think the pressure that generates from the sort of guild nature of the legal profession, that there's this community that, you are part of that is entitled to be the law. And it does take itself seriously in a way that I think politics does not have a guild, right? It doesn't, if you're Art Buchwald and you just want to make fun of or Stephen Colbert and you just want to make fun of the political system, you are not less part of the political dialogue for doing that But if you're throwing grapes at the justices, you are actually less part of the legal commentariat than if you are, buying the persona of the legal system as an autonomous actor.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that the profession itself deserves mockery. I mean, you've had a few folks do it. Walter Olson had, did some great stuff with Overlawyered, obviously. Well, I'm blanking on a few of the others that I've really liked over the years, but I do think that you're right. The sort of the time honored profession thing. It's a profession of great distinction. I think that there's been more cynicism introduced into it in the last couple of decades, probably. But ultimately, by the time that a person gets to a place where they feel comfortable enough mocking the profession, they have invested a lot, and they're worried, frankly, about like sort of losing. I think if you're a practitioner, for example, you're worried a little bit about reputational harm.
So why aren't you?
Why am I not worried about that?
I mean, you started A Crime a Day. You could have kept it anonymous. You could have published the book under
a pseudonym
Crime a Day. But you're, as far as I know, unretaliated against by the legal establishment. What's the why is that? And, is the concern overrated?
I think it is. I think it's overrated as long as what you're doing, is, if you're just throwing bombs for the sake of throwing bombs, people are going to see that pretty quick. I mean, that's one thing about the legal profession is there's a lot of dummies out there, but there's a lot of really smart, brilliant people. And if they spot what you're doing and they think that it's disingenuous, they'll call you out on it pretty quickly. But if they know that something is actually coming from a meaningful, researched, considered place, and it still has a tone of mockery, I think a lot of people will say, well, maybe we should examine. And I will just tell you, the most encouraging thing for me to come out and not be anonymous has frankly been, I've heard from a lot of federal judges directly who have said, I read your book and I thought it was really silly at first. I was just getting it for my kid, but I read it and like, this is an issue. This is a real problem. And I'm interested in your thoughts on it. I've talked to federal judges. I've talked to prosecutors about it. And so there are some people who aren't impressed with it, but they generally just overlook it. But I've gotten a lot of encouragement from people I respect in the profession who say this is something worth examining, and I'm glad you're examining it. So I just haven't seen any negative effects from it, frankly.
I think that's really good. And I think I think humor is one of the really undervalued things going on in the law, and so I want to play something for the audience. Mike, I'm sure you know this. You've probably seen it 100 times, but this one actually does do something that, Mike, you do not do, which is take on federal district judges. Let's check it out.
Imagine me as God, I do. I think about it day and night. It feels so right to be a federal district judge and know that I'm appointed forever. I was anointed by the president. A revelation told that I was heaven sent. The Senate in its wisdom granted their consent. Appointed forever. I'm a federal judge and I'm smarter than you. For all my life, I can do whatever I want to do. For all my life, bring to me the discovery. No matter what the issue is, I guarantee somebody will be sanctioned as the penalty, and there'll be no error. My decisions cannot be questioned by you. I'm always right, and my wise discretion is never abused for all my life. Think of me as royalty when you appear before me, fall upon your knees, all knowing and omnipotent. It's nice to be appointed forever. The very worst, if you decide to take me up to get reversed, you'll have to get the circuit court to hear you first, and that takes forever. Appointed forever, employed forever. Appointed forever.
That was pretty great.
Yeah,
So now
I've.
now we're gonna do the song we've been practicing, right? Or are we ready
Yeah.
to do it?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Ready?
Ready?
Go.
Yeah.
Seriously, why do people think that, first of all, I want to say this song is in fact the essence of practicing before a federal district judge. And anybody who denies that is either in the tank for their local federal district judges or has never actually practiced in front of one.
So can I just say something, which I would love to have this conversation, but like, let's call it what it is, which is like talk about judicial reform in terms of kind of talking about judicial reform in terms of appointment versus election. I think that this is something that is huge. Like I see more often, sorry, I'm like, there's like a weird sunbeam in my face. But
I
I see,
good lighting. Yeah.
but I see much more often like this problem of people, especially like elite people at Yale Law School or other types of things, coming at state and local judges because they're elected, which they think somehow puts them in the pocket of various types of of entities, and like they have a lot of like the Alabama Supreme Court or like the Alabama trial court will like run some like crazy video of like a judge like shooting with his dog and being like, I love Second Amendment rights. Like they're never going to see a Second Amendment case in their entire lives, like sitting on the bench. It's just never going to happen. Right. But like they kind of they run with that type of thing. And even Sandra Day O'Connor, after she left the bench, went and on like kind of this rampage, kind of, I thought, against elected judges as like, and instead we should have them appointed. And I'm like, my point is always like, but appointed by who? Like they're always appointed by people in power that have kissed the ring in some way. People who have like, and I'm not trying to belittle all of the people that I know who have been appointed as federal judges or their accomplishments, because oftentimes for because of accident or purposefulness, there happen to be very well qualified human beings, but they also like have played a game of politics for their entire life that they intend to cash in on the fact that like someone's going to appoint them.
What's the Connecticut judicial appointment system like?
Governor. Yeah, the governor.
Yeah,
so
they're all governor-based.
So you've never practiced in front of elected judges?
No, that's not. Well, so
No.
I will tell you a couple of things here. So, funny enough, the state court judges on the superior court and then elevating up through the appellate courts, they're appointed by the governor. There'll be a slate recommended. The governor will confer with the counsel to the governor, and then ultimately the legislature will finally vet them, and they'll be put on the bench. But probate judges, which I think don't get enough attention, quite frankly. Probate judges are elected, and people suggest that this means, oh, well, those are the sort of like unimportant local. Wrong. They decide some of the most fundamental, most important rights of that ever come in front of the judicial system.
Huge amounts of money from a state.
Money. Think about conservatorship, deciding whether or not you get to be your own person anymore. You know, a whole bunch of things. I've tried cases before federal district court judges, state court judges. I've argued appeals before state appeals courts, and I've had trials before probate judges. And the cases that kept me up at night the most were the cases before the probate judges, okay? Because they were deciding, you know, deep fundamental rights. What does your life savings mean? What does your freedom mean? Are you a person? Are you really a whole person anymore? You know, things like that. Sentencings before district court judges can be frightening, but oftentimes, you know, we sort of know we're dealing with the United States sentencing guidelines. We sort of know what the benchmark is, but the judges that get elected, they may never have tried a case. You may have to educate them about the rules of evidence. You may have to educate them about what, you know, the law actually is. I've been lucky to deal with very smart ones and very capable ones, but it is scary. And so, you know, I do think that something that's endemic in the federal district court system that should be looked at is that the disproportionate number of former United States attorneys that become judges versus federal defenders or versus even members of the private defense bar, right?
I was going to say, like there's so few federal defenders. I mean, and that's such a, I mean, I almost think it's a more rarefied than the AUSAs.
Right. Yeah. No, it's for sure. And it would be good to see some more of that. And I think that there's just a fear, right? There's a fear that you're going to put somebody on the bench and they're going to do something crazy that looks a little bit too much like being extra lenient or not being tough on crime, whatever that continues to mean, and that you're going to end up facing some political whirlwind because somebody didn't get a result, you know, didn't have some result come about that the electorate thinks should have. You know, I don't know that there's any one, like, there's no panacea. There's no good one fix to it. But I will tell you, I think that the electoral system with probate judges, you know, does periodically work, but it certainly has great risk to put people that are wholly unqualified to be on the bench. So every level of like trial, intermediate appeal, and court, like top level Supreme Court in I'm assuming it's called the Supreme Court of Connecticut. In New York, it's obviously Supreme Court is the trial level, confusingly, appellate division, and then Court of Appeals. And the top two appellate divisions are appointed by the governor, but the trial court you run for a period of 14 years, and it's elected. So, but you're saying that like all of those levels are appointed in Connecticut? Yeah, all of the appellate levels are appointed. Yeah.
No, I mean, but you're also saying Superior Court is appointed.
Yeah, the Superior Court or the trial court judges. Yeah, they are appointed. Yeah, they're by the governor. I mean, essentially, right? They're nominated by the governor, and then they're approved by the legislature. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, who's the funniest judge in America?
That's a good question.
You know, I think that depends, and I think humor is tricky because we do live in a time when everything is hyper politicized, right? And so there's going to be a large segment of folks that are going to view, you know, well, look, let me just put it this way. I think it depends on what context you're talking about. Are they funny outside of the court, or are they funny in their opinions?
No, but I mean, like, people who, in their judicial capacity in one way or another, make you laugh. Very hard to say. I think privately.
It seems like a private thing. Like, I don't think any of the judicial opinions I've ever read have made me laugh. It always seems like the audience. It always does seem like try hard, doesn't it? Even Kaczynski.
Oh, Kaczynski was complicated because he could be very funny, it was a generally pretty mean kind of humor.
Right. Well, that's
And
right. Yeah.
it turns out that was, reflecting something.
There are judges that I think are funny. I think they're funny when they when they retire. Sometimes, Judge Bennett was. I wouldn't say he was laugh out loud funny, but he had so much sort of experience in this universe that I think he was funny. But it's very tough. I don't know that I could peg anybody as particularly funny, because
I want to tell you about the funniest moment I ever saw in court.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
So this is toward the end of the Clinton administration, and Harry Edwards, who is famously regarded as like one of the meanest judges on the DC circuit.
I took his tiny NYU law appellate class, and he taught me appellate briefing, and he is so fucking smart on administrative law, and I was stupid that I was like, I'm never going to be able to, like, this person is. He also weirdly gave us an autographed Bill Cosby book for our parting gift from the class.
Well, that was probably before
it was
Bill Cosby
indeed. It was indeed before the Bill Cosby event happened.
Harry Edwards is is a complicated individual. I think very highly of him. He's a real force of intellect, and but it is toward the end of the Clinton administration, and he is then the chief judge of the DC Circuit, and he and David Tatel and a different judge who I don't remember are sitting on a panel, and it is a Larry Klayman motion, a petition for a writ of mandamus against the district court. Larry Klayman, for those of you who don't know him, is a right-wing gadfly lawyer who, I should be careful how I say this, since he's quite litigious, is, I think, eccentric is one way to describe it. And
I think that sounds solidly not like slander and more like opinion, but okay.
Yeah, in my opinion, he is eccentric. He was up there, and this is a 20-year-old hearing, so if I get the details of it wrong, Mr. Klayman, please forgive me. But he is up there arguing for a writ of mandamus against Judge Royce Lamberth, the district court judge, who, by the way, is very funny. And he is on best behavior. He has been in front of this court many times. They are very aware of his eccentricity, and he is, Klayman is, among other things, a smart guy, if eccentric, and he is doing a very respectable presentation, particularly for him. And finally, David Tatel says to him, counsel, you make without disrespecting your arguments, mandamus is a highly disfavored remedy in this court, and we grant it only under genuinely extraordinary circumstances. And Klayman, it's like again, in my opinion, it was like something in his head just snapped. And he goes, "Are you telling me, Judge Tatel, that Janet Reno can murder women and children in Waco, Texas, and there's nothing this court can do about it?" And Harry Edwards just looks at him, and he goes like this. He goes, "And you were doing so well." And the entire court erupts in laughter, except Larry Klayman, who's like beet red. And about 15 years after this, I was having dinner at the house of Justice Department lawyer, and I mentioned this incident, and she goes white, and she was like, "Were you in the room when Harry Edwards says, 'and you were doing so well'?" And it's like this legendary thing among people who practice.
He's not that funny.
No, he's not in general a funny guy. This was a super funny moment.
Yeah. It's really good. Okay, we're going to go. Genevieve, thank you for waiting in your beautiful red room on your beautiful couch with your beautiful background. You look like you're in a faculty club and like I should be dressing up for you.
No, this is like the most photogenic spot at my parents. So I'm
so
just
nice.
really lucky. But hi. And so my question for you guys is, what is the most important characteristic you think a judge should have?
That's a really good question.
Humor.
Well,
No.
I think to the song that you played, right? I think an important characteristic in a judge is coming to every case recognizing that they may not be the smartest person in the room, and that they have it's just like anybody, right? What's a good quality in anybody? Willing to be educated by other folks around you.
Humility.
You can look. A judge should project confidence, and a judge should instill respect in folks around them. They should not let their court, let people run roughshod over them. That's fine, but they should have an open mind, because oftentimes they may realize that this is not like every case of this kind that they've ever seen before. And so humility is one way to put it, but I really just think a willingness to be educated by folks, I think really matters. Yeah. And it's not fairness for the sake of being fair, like being even-handed. I think it's willing to listen and be willing to be educated. Yeah.
What do you think, Ben? Hey, Christopher Ardress. We'll get to you in 1 second.
I think a certain intellectual humility is an essential part of integrity. And I know lots of very smart people who have no humility, and they may be very earnest, and but they're bad judges as a result of the lack of exactly what Mike is talking about. Just the inability to say, hey, counsel is presenting a situation here that doesn't fit neatly into my worldview. And rather than beat the facts until they confess, I've got to let the worldview adapt a little bit. And I just, the longer I watch the judicial system, the more I regard that as not as integrity, but as sort of a failure of suppleness.
Yeah.
A judge should be supple. I agree. 100%. Totally supple.
I'm gonna cheat and name 3 things. One is I obviously agree with like the intellectual humility, but I'm going to actually say that like also just like a general sense of humility. Like I think for us, and this is specific to trial judges, but maybe to appellate judges, but especially trial judges should be able to like act as mediators between parties, especially when it comes down to money, to like basically avoid trial by trying to force a settlement or trying to like negotiate a settlement and like come to grips with the case so that they can effectively be like a mediator between things. And I know that that's like an in the weeds comment that is lost to most people, but like for most of litigation in like, especially in state courts, like I would say 80% of litigation is like just about money.
It's true.
Yeah. And like just about money, and it's not like a federal level or whatever. People just want to kind of settle, and like people should settle. You should always settle for money, and judges should be always willing to facilitate that. The other thing I would say is kind of based on like the research that Dan Kahan and Dave Hoffman and a bunch of other people did a couple of years ago out of Yale, which was like the idea of motivated reasoning, and like the idea that actually, even though we think of judges as biased, judges and like there's like almost a smooth scale between like a professionalized judgment between ordinary people, law students, lawyers, and then people who become judges, of like having an ability to set aside whatever their individual politics are and to look at the facts of a case and let the law kind of lead them where it should go. And I think that is like an understated ability. Like, I think that that's actually super, super compelling. Yeah. And I don't know, I guess that was 2 things, but there was a 3rd thing, but I forgot it. And anyways, Christopher Ardress from the Gloam of London. So nice to see you.
Hi. Hello, everyone. So I was thinking, back to the previous guest you had on. It was the public defender, when he was talking about like this issue of judges not being the most represented in terms of following this law clerk, federal prosecutor kind of track. And so I was also thinking about the way that the average person watching cable news gets their legal analysis from former federal prosecutors. And back to the O.J. Simpson era, it used to be at that time, it was mostly like criminal defense lawyers. So I wondered sort of we used to have crossfire representing both sides. Whether there's sort of like a lack of sort of, I'm not going to say like prosecutorial bias or prosecutorial side, but the sense that the criminal defense lawyers are underrepresented in sort of legal commentaries to sort of provide the analysis that people do have the presumption of innocence, and there sometimes is overzealous prosecutions. Because I think, we're sort of coming out of the Trump era where there was so much criminality all around. It's sort of warped our perspectives that there's so much crime to be found, and like it's up to prosecutors, and that's why we have the commentary from prosecutors. But sort of going back to this idea of judges being less represented, is there more of a need, and how do we get sort of more of a commentary from defense lawyers and other areas where it's not just former federal prosecutors on cable news shows?
Totally. I mean, I'm going to put some balance on what Chris said and just kind of say that, like, I also think that we're dominated by completely attention-seeking defense attorneys like Dershowitz and, of course I'm going to forget names, but what's her, Aldridge, like, just like a lot of kind of like very kind of like sensationalized, like willing to sensationalize their client, willing to do whatever. Curious query whether it's about their client or it's about their own reputation, like all of these kinds of like types of things. So I will say that there's that. So I would also kind of put that there's, it's certainly not like Dershowitz is being invited to join the federal bench, but it's also not as if but I also don't know that is like a winning, like I don't know that that's what we want for the federal bench, and that's kind of what kind of a lot of criminal prosecutors are getting, or federal defenders are getting like made into, or criminal defenders are getting made into.
Yep. No, I think that's right.
We should leave it there. Mike Chase, you're a great American.
Oh, well, I guess I've earned it. You
have a book and a dog.
What, Ben? Like, that was a very good, like, there was 3 clues. I could have said he had brown hair. Like, what do you want me to do? I'm, like, just trying to make this as mysterious as possible.
The clues have to give rise to a chance of identifying the mystery guest. So,
Ben,
for example,
last clues that you gave, what were they?
They allowed people to identify the mystery guest.
You were ready to type devastatingly handsome, but you just backed off at the last minute,
right.
Which is what happened.
Oh, hold on. Wait. Hold on. No, David Botts is still here. He gets last word. He has a great question for Mike.
Right.
Sorry. David.
The beard's still there, man.
It's still there. I'm thinking about next Saturday, so we should talk.
Perfect. We should talk.
For Just Us. Mike, I got your book right here.
It looks great. Right on the wall is perfect. That's where it should go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
crime like hollowed out by the inside of like some handcuffs. Great.
Yeah, it's good.
Weird everything. It's great.
Got squirrels. Kate, got your squirrel.
And
bet you can't identify the blue bird with the crown.
What the fuck
though.
is that blue bird?
I don't know.
It's a kookaburra.
Wait, what?
I have no idea.
Okay, damn it.
Okay.
God.
So so it seems as a general matter that the fastest way to definitely commit a federal crime is to talk to somebody about maybe doing a federal crime. And I just wonder about your thoughts on that.
Oh no, are you going to talk to us about doing a federal crime on live?
Well, no, I'm not going to do that, but I've got a confession
You
to
can't
make.
just talk, though. You have to take an overt act.
Okay, so you have to talk, then act.
You
But-
got to reach an agreement to do something.
For a conspiracy, sure. Yeah.
And then but just what crime can you commit just by talking about committing the crime?
Well, we're about to find out, I feel like.
By advocating the overthrow of the government is a pretty good one.
Yeah, to never prosecute it though.
Yeah, the
could.
sedition. Well, Mike, I have not committed sedition, but I will tell you that my work group meets. We've got like Mondays and Wednesdays we get together, and I start off with a crime of the day, which I generally, but not always, steal from you, where I cite excellent cranberry cheese, and coming up tomorrow, I think is going to be use of a faucet that is not a designated fish faucet.
That's right.
In the
This is
national
making
park.
me hungry.
So, yeah.
Fish faucets. That's all
That's
you
right.
have to say. Fish faucets.
Fish faucets. Yeah. Mhm.
So anyway, I love your Twitter feed, and
thank
everybody should definitely buy your book and buy your next book. So thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we're going to leave it there. It is, we will be back 22 hours and 57 minutes from now, hopefully with Aaron Krolik and Kashmir Hill, who are going to be discussing their New York Times article about kind of the bad exploitive actors of online reputation management, which is just like, have you guys seen this? Did you see this, Mike, this story?
Yeah, it's today. Yeah, sarcastic.
It's
Yeah,
fucking
that's right.
awesome. It's such a great piece.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, she said it made her, I was like talking to her about it on the phone today, and she said it made her more depressed than anything she's worked on in a long time.
She's batting 1,000. She's batting
kicking
1,000.
ass.
Yeah.
between this and that crazed Canadian woman who
and the clear, you're forgetting the clear view. She broke
I remember the
thing
clear
on
view,
Clearview.
but the I just want to say to all our Canadian viewers,
She's in jail now. That
do
woman's
something about that woman.
She
'Cause
knows
she's-
they did.
No,
in
she's gonna
jail.
she's gonna get out of jail.
No,
she's
she's
gonna
not.
immediately start.
No. This is crazy. Like, so after Cash's thing, she got locked. She got like, and this is why Cash, when she was so weird, and like Cash wasn't telling me because she didn't want to like. I was like, why are you being so like you're being like really weird about this? Like, it's just like, talk to us about this other piece you did. And she was like, I'm working on a piece that's really high profile, and like I just can't talk about. Never mention where I am or anything about my family. Like, as long as like we're on air, and it's like, okay. And then this woman was like, and then this piece came out a couple weeks later, and I was like, well, shit, babe, like, why didn't you tell me that? Like, she was like, I didn't want to like implicate you at all. I didn't want her to come after you. I just wanted you to be completely innocent. And like, the weird thing is that woman was completely nuts. She went after everyone. And so,
Yeah,
but she ended up getting arrested.
I'd stop talking about her if I were you, because eventually she's going to get out of prison and she's going to go straight to the nearest public library and start posting shit about Kate Klonick. And
Okay.
I just don't think we need that.
Okay, that's fair. But
so,
I mean, yeah,
we will be back tomorrow with Aaron Krolik and Kashmir Hill.
Or someone else.
Probably, if not them, then somebody else. Maybe with the three wolves who are
oh
howling
yeah, you
at the
didn't even
moon.
like. You can.
Yeah,
Can you wear the T-shirt again tomorrow so you can tell the story?
Sure. But nobody's allowed to be upset with me for wearing the same.
No one's upset with you.
Okay.
That's okay.
That'll be 22 hours and 55 minutes from now, Kate.
Yep. And until then, we don't have fun anymore, but we are allowed to make fun of federal judges. Is there a rule against that, Mike Chase?
No, ethical considerations, but not
Ethical considerations, but I'm pretty sure it's First Amendment protected.
Sure. Oh yeah.
Although if you have a case in front of the specific judge, you might risk a contempt proceeding.
Keep your
Yeah.
trap.